What's going on, fam? Welcome to the Eat My Assets podcast, your go-to spot for everything personal growth. In today's episode, we'll be speaking with Scott Mullin, VP of Sales at Cortex. Cortex is the internal developer portal that cuts noise for developers with paved paths to production. They've recently raised $35 million in Series B, bringing their total funding to around $53 million. This is also Scott's second stint as a VP of Sales, having been in sales for over 11 years, working at the likes of Splunk, Experian, FireHydrant, and more. Today, Scott teaches us how to go from an entry-level job to becoming an executive. He talks about this in the context of sacrifice and how the work ethic he built from his first job carried over to the rest of his career. He also talks about this in the context of mentorship and how he's been consistently able to find the right mentor at each stage of his career. He even talks about this in the context of taking big bets and how he made a jump from being an individual contributor to head of sales. This and a lot more to unpack, so let's get right into the show.
Yeah, and it's been like an incredible ride, right? Like started with 2 people in the sales org, and now we think we have like 30 and gearing up for next year. So we'll talk about that.
Do you think previously, because you're traveling a lot now, do you think previously before it would have been a different, just where you're at in life, like would the traveling have been a toll, or are you having fun this time? Like, I'm just curious, what
it's a little,
you think of the traveling?
It's a little of each. Like I definitely enjoy traveling to the fun places. So, when the conference list came out, I was like, all right, Chicago, going there, Dublin, going there, London, got to go there. And then I'm like, Detroit, seen that before, San Francisco.
What's wrong with Detroit?
I have to go every other month. Detroit's great. We were just there though. So got to spread it around and pick my battles.
That might have been one of my favorite trips just in the past 2 years. So.
Yeah, that was fun. I think the tough part is like when you live in New York, there's always this feeling of you leave and you're like, oh, I can't wait to go see something else. It's amazing. And then that gravitational pull to come back. And like October's, I think, is the best month in New York. And I blinked and I've been gone 3 out of 4 weekends. And I'm looking forward to just chilling this weekend.
Do you ever, this could just be me, but do you ever go to another city and try to play the comparison game to New York City again?
I think only from a perspective of like, you can go to another city and go to like a Michelin star restaurant and spend less than you would on takeout and just a drink somewhere normal in New York. So that's the best part about traveling is, and leaving New York is, you end up saving money, even if you're doing something extravagant versus like having a low key night in New York.
Yeah, 100%. For where you're at today for Cortex, what's keeping you up at night right now? Like what do you got? What do you got going on? You mentioned that Q4 is coming up. What does Q4 even mean for other people that are listening in? Why is there so much pressure when you think about Q4?
Yeah, so a little bit about our company. So it's venture backed, which means it's a growth company. And so what we do at the beginning of the year is we set targets, and then ideally the company is growing revenue significantly quarter over quarter. And to give you an idea, from last year to this year, you want to grow somewhere in a magnitude of 3 to 5x in terms of revenues. So it's a pretty significant step up, and you only have 4 quarters to make that happen.
Oh, wow. As like SaaS company or companies in general, they want like 3 to 5x revenue?
As a SaaS company, it really depends on your stage. Obviously, as you get bigger, law of large numbers, it gets tougher and tougher to continue like triple or quadruple. The best ones do it. Like if you go look at Databricks and what they've been able to do at $1 billion in ARR, it's just...
They're at $1 billion in ARR now.
$1 billion in ARR and growing like...
Shit.
I don't know, 50 or 70% quarter, year over year. It's pretty wild. So, but yeah, so for our Q4, like we've had a really great year. We've, executed well against the plan. And then now it's, if you flop Q4, then it's all for naught because, you had 3 great quarters. So you really try and finish with a bang. And we sell to engineering orgs and IT directors, well, not IT directors, but IT org, R&D org, selling up to the CTO, chief technology officer, and a lot of them backload their budgets. There's a lot of budget to go after, and it's really about trying to finish the year strong.
What does a VP of sales do in a SaaS company? Like, what are you in charge of?
So it depends on the size of the org. In a large company, a VP of sales manages 1 or multiple sales teams. The big difference is whether or not they're reporting to the CEO. So if they're not reporting to the CEO, then the direction as far as the strategy and how they do what they do is determined by whoever sits in between them and the CEO, which could be a chief revenue officer. In startups, like in my company today and my last company, I'm a VP of sales, but I'm also a head of sales. And so what that means is everything from setting the strategic direction of what the sales team actually does, who are we selling to, how are we selling what we're selling, who are we bringing into the team, where are they sitting, what's their focus. So it's strategic, and then it's also tactical execution of going and, knocking over deals with reps and all that kind of stuff and everything in between.
Yeah, what's crazy with Cortex where you're at now, I think the Series B was like 35 mil. That puts y'all at total funding of around 53 mil if you include, this is just me looking it up, online.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty damn big company. And like, one thing I forgot to ask, even backtrack so people understand what we're even talking about. Like, what is a SaaS company and how does a model for SaaS work? Because you've worked for many SaaS companies. So
Yeah. So it's a good question. I've been doing SaaS now since like SaaS was a thing. So
right out the womb.
Right out the womb. So I happened to graduate college right around the time that that public cloud became a thing, right? And so SaaS is a delivery model. It's a way that companies, you used to have a server farm and you'd host your server there and install CDs on it. And now it's all hosted in the public cloud, which is just somebody else's data center and you're just accessing it. And so
instead of you holding a physical machine like right here
exactly,
in person, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's really great because from a builder's perspective, you can build a product and get to market much faster. Investors love it because no longer are you buying a physical asset like a CD, you're licensing a service on a recurring revenue model. So investors love that because they can then predict the revenues that are going to come in the out years. And so it's really easy to value those revenues in the future. So investors love that.
So for SaaS, like how does revenue work and how do these companies even get evaluated to begin with? Like take Cortex aside, just think about like a SaaS company in general.
Yeah. So, there's a couple things that go into it. Most of the time you're doing prepaid subscriptions. And so again, selling developer tooling, which is, my domain of expertise, companies pre-purchase on a 1 to 3 year, pre-allotment. So they'll sign a contract, they'll prepay, and then they'll, essentially burn that contract down to amortize it over 12 or 36 months.
So for 12 to 36 months, and then that's what they call ARR because it's annual recurring revenue. So that's how you're able to keep track, right, of like the revenue you have each year.
Yeah. And so what you're trying to do is you're securing contracts, the revenue recurs because it's a commitment every year or every month. And then what you're trying to do is make sure that you have happy customers and you continue to renew and just build on top of the revenue base you have. And then everybody gets happy because, revenues accrue and everybody gets rich. So
And before we get to the specifics, because I want to hear all about like everything you've learned up to this point now and, how you actually got to Cortex. But what I thought was funny is that we were looking through your experience of when you first started. And I don't know if this was right, but did it say Experian as in the credit union? You're selling software there.
Credit bureau, yeah. Yeah, so when I graduated, you had, you really had two. So I was dead set on working in Boston after school and you had two choices. It was Oracle or a subsidiary of Experian. And so I looked at Oracle and was like,
Boston.
Yeah, it was like, not for me. So I went to school in Rhode Island, so it was an easy jump. And JV New York, so it made sense.
It's like, what are you even selling for Experian? Why are you selling to other companies?
Data validation services.
Data validation.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, I think if you could sell that, then, you get your hands on a good product and you can be dangerous. So it was definitely a good place to start.
Yeah. And throughout you went to, you've been in a lot of companies, some small, like NS1, it seemed like it was small at the time before it got bought out by
IBM.
Yeah. And then you worked for huge companies too, like SignalFX and, there's one other large company. Oh, no, Experian was the other large company.
Yeah.
But SignalFX, huge too, 5,000, 10,000 employees. Like you're kind of going to different sizes companies.
Signal was like 200 employees when I joined and then got acquired by Splunk.
How big was it when you left Signal?
So Signal got acquired by Splunk and I'm not a big company guy. So I looked around and I was like, I'm out of here. So
you're still pretty small at that time.
Yeah, pretty small. But I think like early in your career, there's a lot of calibration that happens and there's a lot of figuring out, what's your risk profile? Are you okay working in a startup? Like there's a lot of different startups. You could go 10 employees, you could go 100 employees, 10 employees, you're probably buying your own laptop and figuring out how to connect it to the internet versus, much larger companies. So there's trade-offs and all of that. And it's really about calibrating what's exciting to you, what's comfortable, where you're going to really thrive and grow. And for me, I'm a builder, so I always gravitated towards not really small, but companies that are there to be built and take it to the next level.
When you think about sales, maybe for everyone else, what are the What are the tiers of sales, like all the way up even to the VP of sales or CRO where you're at now for the viewers?
Yeah. So, it starts with a BDR or an SDR, and that could be business development or sales development. It's really just nomenclature depending on the business. As you get bigger, some companies like bifurcate, I think is the right word, those two functions.
Big word.
Nice. It is a big word.
Yep.
So you have BDR and SDR, and they're doing a lot of demand generation, drumming up demand, qualifying it. Then you go up to SMB account executives. Now you're closing, but it's the smallest accounts out there, growth accounts. Then from there, it's commercial mid-market up to enterprise. From enterprise, you're 1,500 to most companies don't have a ceiling as far as full-time employees. It's very, very large companies. And then you get into strategics, which is, okay, now you're selling Wall Street banks and maybe the Fortune 50.
Gotcha.
And then there's obviously layers of management in there from first line, which is maybe your sales manager, sales director, where you're managing managers, and then VP of sales. And there's nuance there, whether it's a startup or it's a growth company or a larger company, a startup, head of sales reports to the CEO. Big company might have, head of sales might also be a VP of sales. Big company might have hundreds of VPs of sales all doing different.
Oh, are they like RVPs? Or are you talking about actual like?
Could be regional. Yeah, it could be over lines of business. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Did you know this trajectory, by the way, when you came out of college? Because you had a marketing degree and whatnot too, right?
Yeah, no, I think like my college didn't offer sales programs, and frankly, I view myself as an entrepreneur. Like that's what I gravitated towards, and college for me was a necessary evil. I looked at it a lot I figured out at some point in my life that it was a game, and like all games, there's a set of rules, and once you understand the rules, then you can play it. And what I learned is that my GPA was not going to be directly correlated to ultimately the opportunity I got professionally afterwards, whether I started my own company or, went into software sales, which I ultimately did. And, I just never believed, like, put me in a room with a hiring manager. I never thought they're going to sit there and, buy me and then say like, well, it's a 2.7 or it's a 3.2, it's a 3.4. Like that was never going to be my deciding factor. And so once I decoupled those two things, it was really tough for me to buy into Psych 101. And instead I gravitated towards entrepreneur classes and economics and things that really scratched my itch. And, I got A's in those and did what I needed to get by in the others, and did an internship that got me into sales. And I just loved the fast pacedness of it, and things sort of took off from there.
Well, what's interesting too is because even when I was at job fairs when I was younger, coming out of college, they always looked at the banks specifically were the only ones that I ever saw that actually looked at GPA. So they didn't care what major you're in. They're just like, you need a 3.2 and above to even apply for this job, right? So it's funny that you're saying that, because there's like what I realize is almost no job looks at GPA. Were they even looking at your GPA when you were out there?
I have a really funny story. So there's a really famous CRO. I'm not going to name names, but I worked for him, and he was actually my last real sales leader before I went out on my own as a head of sales like 5 years ago. And in my interview, I spent all this time like going over my numbers, making sure my resume was all prepped up, and he just flipped it over and he's like, "This is where I want to start." There's no text on that page, and he was like, "Tell me about your family. Are you the youngest? You're the oldest?" And I could see he was really trying to read me, and then he was like, "What was your GPA in school?" And I was like, 3.0, and he goes, so he rounded that up. And I remember just feeling so found out in that moment. But that was really the only time my GPA ever, and that was 8 years into my career. So that was really the only time that ever became a talking point.
Kind of fucking weird, honestly. But did you tell him you rounded up?
I mean, we just sort of laughed about it. And I just flipped it over and I was like, can we talk about some of these sales numbers?
You alluded it. You're like, yeah.
But I thought that was hysterical.
Dude, that's great. That's crazy. Then moving up the ranks right now. And Ron, one thing I was going to ask you while we're talking through this, can you look up the average salaries of each of those positions Scott was talking about?
And I'm happy to talk. Like I can talk about, like I actually have like funny kind of story about what I was making in each of those roles.
Yeah. What did pay look like back then?
Yeah. So I remember, I got my first job. It was, 10 years ago. I was a BDR in Boston, and I was so excited. It was $40K a year. And I remember getting the pay and I was like, holy shit, I'm fucking rich. And like your brain starts to do all these calculations of like, what am I going to buy with my 40 grand? And I remember thinking like, oh, I'm going to get a car and I'm going to get an apartment.
Damn.
And then you're like, okay, well, taxes, cost of living, and now you're already underwater. And
I was about to say the dollar was hella strong back then.
Yeah. I mean, we were definitely doing better, but it wasn't, I wasn't rich by any means, but, I loved it, right? Like my job as a BDR really set. I think it was really formative for my career. I had to be at my desk 7 a.m. I couldn't leave till 7 p.m. My manager told me every day's an interview. There's 12 of you, 10 of you aren't getting promoted, and your road will end if you don't make that jump up. Shaved face, dress shoes. Like, people got sent home if they came in with sneakers or stubble on their face. And honestly, like, thinking about it like that and commuting into work, and like, I think I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor at the time. Like, I love that because it set the tone. And like, now I wake up every day with this crazy sense of urgency. Even 10 years later, I like spring out of bed. But I certainly wouldn't sign up for that again. And even the BDRs that we hire, which is really an entry level job, I don't think they would either. So in a lot of ways, I consider myself lucky to be part of that era where it was intense, and it was more stick than carrot. But I think it really, set me up for, helped set up my trajectory for what would come later. So I'm very appreciative of that chapter.
That's crazy that Experian was able to set a culture like that. I'm not saying for good or bad, but I kind of like how Experian was able to get kids to grind it out, because some people don't.
Well, it was carrot and it was stick, right? Because here I am making 40 grand, and then you see the deal bell ring and somebody makes 50 grand on a single deal, and you're just sitting there going like, holy shit, like, this is what this is about. Like, how fast do I need to run? Like, what's wall? Who are we taking out? Like, just point me in the right direction. So
it reminds me of that one scene from Wolf of Wall Street where they're all just in the call room. Leonardo DiCaprio just walks in the room and he's like, holy shit, these people look awesome. Yeah. Making this. So
you show me a pay stub for $70,000. I quit my fucking job today. Got a deal. So yeah, so that really set the tone. And then from there, I was actually, I got close with a strategic rep who, if you go back to my example of the different rungs of the ladder, he was the top global rep. He was out of San Francisco. And so when I got promoted, I always wanted to go out and work in Silicon Valley. That was always going to be a part of my story. I figured that I could either go out there and start a company or at least accelerate my career journey in software sales. And so I went out there, and oddly enough, I bumped into him. We had never met in person. I bumped into him in a bar my first week out there. And he was like, I've only like seen this part of you. And he's like, but are you Scott? And he was like, Adam? So he's like, I just took my first manager job, come work for me at this company called Gigya. And I was like, I just got out here. I got to see this through. A month later, I called him back and I was like, I'm going to come in and interview. It was down in Mountain View. So I went in and interviewed. And Adam was the first mentor I ever had. And I think you can learn so much from a mentor. Like, you can learn in minutes or an hour or maybe a day or two or a session what might take you years to learn on your own, or you might never learn at all. And so Adam really set me up for success there. But going back to my, what I was making as a BDR, here I was 8 months later, and Adam put an offer in front of me, and it was $75,000 on the base salary, $75,000 on the OT. So it's $150,000.
As an AE or BDR?
As an AE.
Wow.
As a first-time AE.
I mean, that's great.
And I remember being like, hang on a second, like 8 months ago, I was making 40 grand, and I was rich. Like, now I'm really fucking rich. Of course, I was living in San Francisco, so I was, again, underwater. And, like, spoiler alert, cost of living goes up as you move up in life, and still not rich, but I thought that was funny where it's like, just like the perspective of, making those next jumps and seeing the big, always chasing that next thing and seeing the next raise and being like, this is it. Like, I finally have enough money to not think about money anymore. And then you get smacked upside the head. So
why did Adam just decide like, yeah, I'm going to take this kid, this random kid from Boston under my wing? Were you talking to him beforehand and providing value, or were you just asking him questions?
I was a BDR, right? So I was setting up a lot of opportunities.
Oh, he was your AE basically.
But I think he also saw the work ethic because, at that stage of my career, and I don't think enough people do this, like, my interview process was just get me in the room, and, the same way I'm leaning forward on the table right now, like, I was on the edge of my seat, just like showing this intensity of what do I have to do? Like who do I have to take out? What wall do I have to run through? Like, I'm going to do whatever you tell me within reason. Just teach me, like, I'm here to be molded. And so I think somebody, the right leader looks at that and, like, when we think about our team at my current company, like, the number one thing we hire for is coachability. Like, we want people that can come in and are hungry to learn and, have some experience, but can draw from that and then adopt what we do really well and what we're teaching. And I think in my first couple jobs, that was my number one pitch was I'm coachable and I'm hungry and I want to learn.
Can you give us the perspective from your mind that you meet this kind of guy? You said he was on the strategic side. Do you have a finger in the wind? Like, it could be 100K range, 200K range even, of like how much you thought he was making at that time. And
I remember, this is all relative, right? Because this would have been 10 years ago. And so obviously there's been inflation, there's been like wage expansion. particularly with like the bull run that just happened in the market, a lot of salaries got out of whack. But this is a theme, but I specifically remember Adam saying to me, because here I am making 150,000. I remember Adam specifically saying to me, like, you're not anybody until you W-2 225.
Damn.
And I remember thinking, that was the base plan, and he was probably making, I don't know, that plus probably closer to 300. And I remember just thinking, like, fuck, a minute ago I was rich, and now I'm back to square one, just chasing that next thing. So
when you meet someone like that, though, that you trust that is actually making that much money, it definitely adds another level of like, oh shit, like you mentioned, I'll do everything within reason that this guy's saying,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think mentorship, like the number one thing you can do to set yourself ahead in your career is to find a few great mentors. And finding an Adam is, I think, priority number one for anybody. It's somebody that's going to actually day to day in your day job or whatever you wake up to do every day is going to teach you and help mold you. But then the next phase of that, and I didn't know it at the time, but I sort of learned it, is now it's about finding mentors that are 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of you, and then speaking to them all and figuring out, okay, well, if I'm a director of sales, who's my VP of sales mentor? And yeah, I'm talking to a VP of sales because they're 1 step ahead of me, but can I find a CRO mentor so I can start planning in the back of my head for a chief revenue officer for what's a couple steps ahead? And sometimes you graduate those mentors, and I still talk to a lot of them, but you have different mentors for different chapters in your life. And I think back to one of my earliest mentors, one of the last business trips we did together. I think I was 27. We were having dinner in Denver. I still remember it. We had a couple martinis, and he just looked at me and he was like, this is probably going to be the end of our run together. We ended up doing another company together. And he was like, but like, I'm really proud of you. And, you're now at the phase of your career where just fucking step into it and just be as big as possible and just go own it. And I remember that conversation. I'm not saying I graduated from that mentor in that chapter, but I remember that was an exclamation point for me where I was like, I've learned so much for this person. Like, what's next?
Yeah, which is crazy. Like, if you were to say to nip this thing on the bud, then when you think about mentorships, like someone else listening right now, especially where you're at today, VP of sales in multiple companies, like how can someone coming in for the first time, entry level, find a good mentor, not just like a mentor, but a mentor that's actually going to propel them forward?
Well, I think it's, I think you have to have an idea where you want to get to, right? And you have to know where you want to, particularly if you're young in your career, where you want to grow and what skills you want to acquire. So that might mean going and identifying the top closer, like the top account executive, strategic rep. That might mean maybe you want to be a finance person, like going and, tracking down the CFO. So you got to figure out like, what are your goals? And then ultimately identify who's the person that's best positioned and are they willing to do that? And then make a pitch. And you'd be surprised. I was at a conference last week. I heard a CRO who I've listened to every one of his podcasts he put out. We had dinner and then I went to his talk last Thursday and he was like, I get so much joy from teaching people what I know. And it actually reminds me what I know and grounds me and it actually makes me better at my job. So people are out there wanting to talk to young people and wanting to help them. You get to a point in your career where it's like you've closed a shitload of deals, you've done the job maybe at a high level, and then it becomes, okay, well, how do I turn around and help other people? And I just think that's something that most people don't take advantage of enough.
Yeah, which is, it's funny, and I won't get into too much detail about this right now because part of why I joined FireHydrant too, Robert's story definitely sold me for sure because you think about mental burnout of, engineers that are on call, have PTSD, yada, yada. But also like talking with you specifically, and you're like, yeah, I want to take this thing from 0 to 1 mil. And then after that, it's like, I want to take this to 1 to 5. You know what I mean? It was like always something else. But you just say it with the like most point blank straight face, like, yeah, here's where we want to take it to next. And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. Like I'm like 23 years old when I first joined. I'm like, or 24. I'm like, fuck yeah, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, man. In this one, it's, and again, I fucking mean it. Like this one's going to 100 mil and then we'll reassess and go from there. But yeah, I think like you got to put it out there. I believe in goal setting. I believe in manifesting what you want. I believe in intentionality and waking up and going after it. And, again, if you're not going to put it out there, if you're not going to say it, if you're not going to believe it, then who is? Nobody's going to come along and say like, hey, Scott, by the way, you should take this company to 100 mil. It's no, you gotta go put it out there and get it.
And what you've done too is take the 100 mil side, because that's obviously a lot and that's almost IPO level. But like when you think about even go from 0 to 1 mil. How many companies actually do that in SaaS? Is it like 10% actually make it that far, that get funding and try to get to 1 mil, something like that?
I think it's like 1%. Yeah.
Roz, can you look that up? How many percent of companies that get funding make it to $1 million in revenue?
Nice.
Yeah, so only 20% actually make it to $1 million ARR, which sounds still high, kind of, honestly. But also 80% failure rate. If you switch it over, that sounds horrible.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And what do you think about, like, throughout your career, you're able to slowly climb the ranks, right? Your enterprise, you eventually got to enterprise AE. Like, would you be able to walk us through a little bit about like what it was like selling software at that level once you made it to like Adam's level, your mentor?
Yeah. And I mean, that's really what my career has been and my background has been lately, is like really focusing on the enterprise. And it's a completely different beast, right? In the mid-market, it's high transaction, it's single BU, so single business unit. You convince maybe 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 stakeholders in an account, and your average sales price is 25, 50K. And because you have less people to convince, you can move deals faster, and it's a much larger segment. And then as you move up market into enterprise, the deals get bigger, but they get slower. You're selling dozens of stakeholders. You've got to entirely map out the org chart, so the organizational structure, who reports to who. It's a political battle, so who are your friendlies? Like, who are the people you have to avoid? How do you navigate all that and put all that together? Public companies don't spend money in the same way as startups do. Startups, on a whim, a venture-backed startup can say, I'm going to go throw 50K at this problem, and that's a mid-market sale. Public company, it's got to come out of a budget that ultimately gets reported to Wall Street, to shareholders. And so every dollar is accounted for. And it's just a different beast. And I just really enjoy the strategy behind it.
So you've sold, in your case, you've sold multiple, I know you've definitely been a part of multiple 7-figure deals, but like when you think about a commission check that you've gotten, have you gotten one higher than 5 figures? Have you gotten a 6-figure commission check before?
Yeah. I mean, I won't go into specifics on me. I think, the largest deal I did was probably mid 7 figures on an annual spend.
Holy shit.
But we have guys on the team right now. I have 2 guys this year who, I won't go into specifics, but, closing 7-figure deals, making 6-figure commission checks. Yeah.
Which is because people think about sales and they think it's all bullshit. So even with that mid 7 figures, what you were talking about earlier, right? Like this talking about you personally, when you think about an AE, like how much percentage, what's the cut of people usually getting, as a rep?
Yeah. So it's if your comp plan's done right, it's ramping. And so you have multiple steps up. So like an enterprise person's making in developer tooling about 320K. So they're making, it's a 50-50 split. So it's 160,000 on base salary and 160,000 on variable. And so if they hit their number, they make 320K. And so that 160 variable is made up as a percentage of their overall number. So if they have to close $1.5 million of business, then it's just that 160 is just made up as a percentage of that. And the way you build a comp plan is you have multiple steps to it. And so your first 40% of that $1.5 million annual number you carry, your quota, you might make 10%. And then once you get in the next bracket, it'll double up. And once you get over the 1.5, it just sort of gets like funny money, internet money, because now you're into accelerators.
Talking about your biggest payday, like what did you do? What does it look like? Put us in the eyes of you.
This is a fucking awesome story. So my first mentor, Adam, I left. So it was time for me to get out of the Bay. I always wanted to be in New York. And so I went to the Bay Area and I was like, I'm going to be successful. And I'm either going to start my own company or accelerate my career in software sales. And I'm getting the fuck back to New York. And so the day I turned 26, I moved home. I was working for a New York tech company and Adam called me and he said, I took a new job. I need a sales leader. So here I am thinking, okay, another big jump up, more pay, managing people. He said, I need you. It's a UK-based company. I need you to start the office and basically bring us into New York. And I was 26. So I remember thinking, this is fucking awesome. And this was in the height of when WeWork was, make WeWork great again. WeWork was great. They had beer taps. I had like friends coming in after work. We were doing happy hours, like playing beer pong. It was nuts. It was awesome. But it was a UK-based company, so all the engineers sat in Newcastle. And I went over there and met the whole team. It was awesome being, telling them about what we were doing over in America, closing these deals. So I closed that mid 7-figure deal with an account out of Canada. And I was like, that's it. It closed. And took the guys out in the office, or a few of us. We went out for a wet lunch like 3 days in a row, like really spending money and, drinking martinis at noon. And that happened like 3 days in a row, and I expensed it. And the CEO was like, mate, do whatever you want. Like, the world's yours. Just like go tear it up. But the CFO didn't feel the same way. So 3 days in to our bender, and he was just watching all these expenses coming in, probably watching like the expenses, but then knowing we weren't actually doing anything, the CFO just emailed me and he's like, hey man, like congrats on your deal, but like enough's enough. Like knock the shit off. Like you've had your fun. Like stop celebrating. And I was like, all right, that's that. So,
so what by everyone else? Like, were you getting mangled during the days, or just a couple martinis? Just have fun.
Don't get mangled during the day. You gotta keep it classy. But definitely a couple martinis, and then probably go back to a couple hours of work. Move the mouse around and then go out after.
I think you're just trying to look good in front of camera, dude. All I see is Wolf of Wall Street, so you to get, minus the extracurriculars.
Oh man,
but
those were the fun days. That was the wild, wild west. You could get away with it.
How did that work though? You said you were managing a team, but then you also closed the deal at the same time.
Yeah, it was a player coach role, which I think is, in hindsight, I don't think is healthy. I don't think that actually works.
Why is that?
I think it's a conflict of interest, because if you want to understand why anybody does anything, you just look at their incentive structure. And so in that model, like maybe you get a rip on other people's deals, but you make most of your money on your deals. Well, then it's, do I give them this deal? Do I close this deal? And it's just too, convoluted. You have to separate it. And this person closes deals and this person makes their number by helping that person close deals.
Would you say that makes bad managers in general? Like
yes.
Take sales aside, but a manager that has to do their own like individual contributor work and then
100%.
And making your way to your first VP of sales role.
Yeah.
You were an advisor at the time. And after they got Series A, that's when you decided to become the first go-to-market hire to get there full-time as the VP of sales. Like, yeah, walk me through that. Yeah.
I have a hot take on advisors. So I think there's this trend right now where people in our generation want to go be an advisor and they don't actually want to work. And so it's easy to, unfortunately, I think people have a couple of years of success in their career and maybe it's a go-to-market function and maybe they see a company to an exit and then they want to go be an advisor and get out of the workforce. I actually think it's problematic because where you learn the most is in the trenches. Like you learn the most as an operator in the day-to-day. Mm-hmm. And these people exiting the workforce because they don't want to hold a 9-to-5 or be accountable for that, I think is actually, it doesn't have to be a 9-to-5, but, putting the work in, I think an advisor is a cop-out. But I basically was de-risking my situation. So SignalFX had gotten acquired by Splunk, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do next. And I was talking to the founders of that company, trying to figure out if I was going to go there full-time. And being an advisor first was like a try before you buy. And it only took a couple months of me. I actually had a full-time job at the time, and I was doing that on the side. And I reached this inflection point where I was spending more time on the company I was advising than my 9-to-5. And I just said, peace out. I'm going to go do this full-time.
I hear this story so many times. How many hours do you think you're putting in, like for just advisement, quote unquote?
It probably, when I like something, I'm all in. So it probably started as 6 or 8 hours a week at first. And then all of a sudden it was more than I was spending on my 9-to-5. So it was probably like 20 or 30. And then from there, it was just like, this isn't fair anymore. I got to go full time.
But how'd you know yourself how much you should be paid for advisement? You know what I mean?
Oh, I didn't know. I mean, I did a really bad deal. You don't know. So it was like largely equity based at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes sense because I know my brother and some other folks, like I've heard like 1% advisement fee, I've heard shit like that for sure.
Yeah. You can definitely structure that. I think the challenge is that you just talked about the failure rate of most startups. Like most companies never make it to an equity event, meaning an acquisition or some type of IPO. And even if they do, if you're joining at the seed stage where I was at, it can be a 15-year ride. So you might accrue some equity and, I don't know if I'm going to be here in 15 years, to be honest. Like you never know.
Is it 15 years now? Before I was told 7, now it's 15.
I mean, I think it's like from $1 million to IPOs like 10 years, but it could take you a couple of years to get to that. So who knows?
Yeah. So making that switch from advisor, did you have to sell yourself again to go from advisor to VP of sales or your head of sales? I guess, initially?
Yeah. Well, so the CEO was really trying to get me there full time, and so that was really great. But then I had to go meet with the board, and that was my first experience. I've been reporting to the board now for 5 years, and part of the reason that I wanted to go out on my own and be be a head of sales was I was sick of having a boss. Like again, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I wanted to go out and build companies and do that on my own. And what I didn't appreciate at the time was I traded one boss, like I traded a CRO for a CEO and then multiple board members. So I was trying to get away from having a true boss, and I ended up with maybe like 3 to 5. But I remember interviewing with the board for the first time, and the CEO had, prepped me for the call, and he's like, they're really excited for you to join. Like I've hyped you up. And then I meet with the board, and it was very clear, particularly with one board member who's, very experienced, that getting Scott Mullin to join the company was not his number one priority.
Oh shit! Really? I didn't know.
And he was, he was great. And we, I worked with him for 3 years, and we worked really well together. But at that time, it was like, you've never done this before. You're coming out of an individual contributor role. Now you're going to be a head of sales. Like how far can you scale? Like, are you going to be closing deals for 6 months and then we're topping you, which is bringing in a boss over you? And I remember I met with the investor in New York, and I said, I'll join, but I want to know that I'm not going to get topped. And he said, this was maybe in like April. And he said, well, the job is yours till the end of the year, and then we'll reevaluate. And that was where I really learned, the biggest thing I took away from that experience was I had one sticky note on my monitor for the 3 years that I was head of sales for that company. And it said, keep your growth curve ahead of the company's. Because in a growth business, the company changes every 90 days. And I knew that I not only had to be executing within the current quarter I was in, but always thinking about the set of challenges that was coming 90 or 180 days out. Because sure as hell, those challenges are going to show up. And if I don't know how to solve them, all of a sudden I'm exposed and I'm going to get replaced or topped or lose my job. And so those first couple of years, I was just, okay, what's coming next? If I can't see what's coming next, like a lot of times the first time head of sales, it's, the analogy I'll give is it's like driving down a dirt road at night with your eyes closed, and you're going 70 miles an hour, and you're like, I don't know am I out of gas? Is it raining? Is there potholes? Is there, a turn up coming? And sometimes you talk to an advisor and they can say like, hey, you got to hit the brakes up here because there's a turn coming. Oh, great. That's great signal. So I was just always trying to figure out what was coming next, and then figure out, okay, is it advisors? Is it podcasts? Is it books? And just consuming information to be able to have an opinion and be educated, have a perspective and experience that when I got to the next set of challenges, I was ready to take it on.
Well, I didn't even realize that you basically they viewed it as a trial period, and which I 100%. didn't realize. And when you think about you going through that trial period, like looking back now, right, the questions that you were asked, I'm trying to say this in a polite way, but
just say it.
When non-operators, and I'm not saying that everyone you talk to was like a non-operator, I'm talking about VC specifically, but when non-operators ask you certain questions, how does that feel looking back in retrospect, those kinds of questions that you were asked? Because they seemed were they questions like that, or were there way more low-level questions like you were talking to like an ex-VP that was drilling you?
Well, I think I have strong opinions on this. So I think a lot of times what VCs are doing is, first and foremost, you can't get an interview without the experience. And your experience has to match the role that you're going for. So that time, what the company needed being pre-revenue was somebody to close deals. And I had 10 years of closing deals experience. So I was interesting to them for that chapter, but what would come next? Could I scale? Mm-hmm. VCs in general, I've always worked really well with the board. Again, the VCs are your boss. Ultimately, the VCs hire and fire the CEO, and the CEO hires and fires the VP or head of sales. Gotcha. But they obviously have heavy influence on the decision that, is the head of sales, VP of sales. So it is tough, right? Like a lot of VCs do have great operator experience. I have a board member right now who is a genius. I love working with him, but he was an operator for like 10 or 15 years at crazy, amazing companies in the Valley. So when he says something, I listen, but honestly, we have a great relationship where he's not a salesperson, and he's got expertise in another area. So he defers to me now as the expert in my domain. I think where I get frustrated, and this isn't just like VCs, this is just people in general, is I have a hard time taking advice from people who haven't done the job before. Mm-hmm. So I get a lot of people that want to sell me sales consulting services. And the first thing I do is jump to their LinkedIn and like, I'm sorry, if you've been a sales consultant for 30 years, like you don't know my world, you don't know my challenges. Like I'm not going to buy in. Like I'm not, it's sort of like back to what I was saying about like academia. It's like, yeah, everything's easy in a classroom. Like come report to the board and fight for your job every 90 days on a multi-year period. Like if you haven't done that, then what are we talking about?
So then let me ask you this question. Those questions that they asked, and you're trying to get this job as a VP of sales, going through those interview questions, like did you at the time not feel like you were ready? Or did you feel like you're ready?
If you feel like you're ready or not, you're not pushing yourself enough. Like one of my favorite quotes is, it's a famous race car driver, and it's Mario Andretti. And he has a quote that says, if everything feels under control, you're not going fast enough. And I just love that. Like, I love the uncomfortableness. Like, you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. That's where the growth is. So I felt that way when I took my current job. I felt that way definitely when I took that last job. It's like, I'm not going to grow if I'm not uncomfortable, right? And so for me, I wake up in the morning and that unease triggers something in me where I know I got to go work my ass off. And that's where I grow, and that's where I rise, and that's where I, obtain my goals. And so I think it's, you got to find ways to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. You're never going to be, like, I think if you're taking a job that's comfortable, then you're probably sacrificing growth.
I had a great time visualizing what you just said, because I also pictured this same race car driver driving 70 miles in a dark road, not know where to go.
That's it. That's the life. That's the life of a VP of sales.
How do you know, even at that point too, like, because other people that eventually they get experience like you do and want to make the switch to a startup, usually it's easier to go to a startup to go in a higher position like you did.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even know what to negotiate for yourself? You don't have to get into specifics of pay, but like, how did you even know how you want to negotiate that? Like, did you bet on yourself and care more about the equity? Did you do a mix? Like, is there a standard? Like, how?
Yeah, so there's standard brackets, right? So depending on your industry, there's standard splits for variable versus base. You're within a certain range based on experience. And then really where the negotiation happens is with the equity. And so once you get into the startup game, and this was, I had this first experience at Gigya, you get what's called equity, which is you essentially get options which you accrue over a 4-year period. And that's a right to buy stock in the company. And once you get into any leadership role, whether it's the head of sales or it's a manager or a second or third line manager, it really becomes an equity game. So your top producing account executives will always make more on their W-2 than your top managers or even the VP of sales. And the reason for that is the VP of sales job is to lead a huge part of go-to-market, right, in partnership with marketing, and expand enterprise value, right? So to grow the overall valuation of the company, to return that to the shareholders. So by putting you on an equity package where the majority of your money is tied to the overall outcome of the company, it aligns your incentives to that of the investors in the larger company.
That's a crazy quote you just said there. The enterprise reps are having higher W-2s than
it's not even close.
Sales
leaders. It's not even close. It's not even close.
That's wild. Then, like, if you were looking back now and thinking about the deal that you made, like, what? It could be scary sometimes, because at that point it's zero in revenue, right? And Cortex, there's basically revenue there. But like, when you think about, if you were to make a decision again, you were to go to a company with like zero ARR, like, how would you position that next time? A brand new company, product not proven, no product market fit yet.
I think the reality is that if you think about what I said as far as growing and making yourself uncomfortable, I've done that. I wouldn't do it again. And so that was my last company. I was pre-revenue. This company, I saw an opportunity to go do something bigger and try and take it to another level. And then you sort of learn where your passions are, right? So I don't know what happens after this one. I don't know where we end up. I don't know what I do next. Some people just say, hey, I like doing 10 million to 100 million in growth. That's my specialty, and I'm just going to go do that over and over again. Some people do 0 to 1, then they do 1 to 10, then they want to do 10 to 100, and then they do 10 to 100 million in revenue, and they say, I want to go take a company from 100 to a billion. And so it's about sort of figuring out, like what you want to do and where your passions are. As far as negotiating offers, there is a lot of prior art there, and a lot of it will be predetermined by, like what the industry comps are. And there's lots of people you can talk to from an advisor perspective to get some, benchmarking on that.
So there's already a lot of data out there for everything. And that gave me chills what you're saying about it. It's like, from what I heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's basically like if someone else, you're coming in and you're looking to get to that kind of level or that kind of experience, you're going to have to fucking dip your toes in the water. You're going to have to go full in.
Everybody has, like, I won't call it a biological clock, but you have a life clock, right? And as you get older, you can inherently take less risk. And so, you can't be 22 and say, I'm going to go be a head of sales. Even a pre-revenue company is not going to hire you. So you got to go out and get some experience. But you reach this tipping point where maybe you have 5 or 6 years experience. Now you're 27, 28. Okay, like now you're getting to a point where it's probably time to bet on yourself. And you got to think about what you want from life, because maybe you want to have kids and a family and you've got that pushing down from the other end. And so that might be a goal of yours when you're 33 or 35. Okay, well now you've got a window of a few years in there where hey, if I'm going to go bet on Mike or Scott, like I'm going to go bet on myself, I'm going to go do it right now because I've got this window where I've got the experience, but I can take the risk. Like now is the time to jump and climb. And, if you fall flat on your face, you can always go back to a bigger company and reset. But you got to be strategic about, what you want in your life and when you're going to make your moves.
It's very rare. Again, we mentioned this. It's an 80% failure rate to go from pre-revenue to $1 million in ARR. So like the no bullshit playbook. How'd you do that? How does one do that without even knowing the great product, but without knowing there's a product market fit?
As far as the playbook for going and driving revenue, or playbook for finding the next great opportunity.
Let's start about finding that product, the next great opportunity, even if it's before, product market fit. And then let's talk about the 0 to 1 mil.
So like when I think about, and this is exactly how I evaluated, when I left my last company to go to my current company, I wasn't interviewing. But there's sort of three things I look for. And the first takes some calibration, and it takes some people in your network, particularly if you're young in your career and you don't yet know trade secrets, or what I mean by that is like industry know-how. And so I think first and foremost, you've got to stack the deck in your favor. And so what I mean by that is you've got to find product market fit. You've got to find something that has some legs, something that has some tailwinds, cloud being a huge movement over the last 10 years, right? So if you went to a company that was riding the cloud wave, you would have done better than going to a company that was going in the other direction. So I think first and foremost, it's, product market fit. The second thing I look for is leadership. And that could be founders. And I don't need founders that are, if I'm not a founder myself, I don't need founders that are, it's their third or fourth time doing it. I need people that lived the pain point before and have accrued secrets about that pain point that uniquely positions them to build a product that's highly differentiated that I can then go sell. And now having a seat at the executive table, it's really about the dynamic that I have with the founders and how we work together. And, I sort of have two speeds. It's like competitive as hell, and then I'm like laughing the other second. And so that's sort of what I ebb and flow between. And then the third is thinking about your own opportunity within the opportunity. So is it a place where you're going to go? Somebody once said to me, you can get in an elevator anywhere, but they don't all move. Some go up, some go down, some don't move at all. And
who are saying these things to you? Those are like,
and I never forgot that. And so, it's about like, what's your growth opportunity, right? Like if you're going to get topped in 6 months and you truly think the board doesn't believe in you, do you want to take that role? Is it an opportunity where you can go grow and accelerate your career if you execute? Is it, you want to go work with, people you can learn from? So it's really about like, what's your role within that opportunity? And, I think if you can calibrate on those three things, you can do pretty well.
And by topped, you're referring to someone, basically you having a boss. Someone
having a boss. And that doesn't matter to all people. That matters to me. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's only one step higher from where you're at that point. So having a boss would have been a direct slap in the face. But now thinking ahead of so now you pick the product. So this is what happened here. First time being head of sales, then of course got promoted to VP of sales there. But how'd you take from 0 to 1 mil?
I think brute fucking force is probably it. But like actually like there is a playbook around it, and that's why you got to get experience before you go do it. It starts with, in B2B SaaS, it's what's your ideal customer profile? And what I mean by that is what are the accounts that have the highest propensity to buy from you in the next, again, if you're being evaluated over a 6-month period, you got to do some deals in those 6 months. Like who can buy in the next 6 months? More realistically, it might be who can buy in the next 1 to 3 years and starting to build a pipeline. So it's what are the characteristics of an ideal customer profile you saw in the tech companies? Who's the persona within those accounts? And then it's okay, well, now we know who can buy. How do we get in front of them and then create a compelling story for why they need to buy from us and buy now? And so, there's a lot that, we could drop down as far as how you do those things specifically. But at the highest level, that's how I think about it.
And I want to drill down that because even what you said, that's happening at extreme rapid pace because I was there with you. So it was literally like
everything at that stage happens at a rapid pace.
Yeah. And what's funny, because even though we were on Zoom, we were like talking all the time because this was during COVID. It was like nonstop communication.
You mean when we were working together?
Yeah. Like it had to be nonstop communication because everything every day was changing, from information you knew. But at the time where you were at, this was before you were even able to hire like a true sales team. I was the first hire on the sales side, but it's not like you had reps, it's not like you had BDRs, it's not like you had any of that. So like at that point in time, you're trying to find ICP. You're trying to figure out what team you want to hire and need to hire. Like what comes first? Like how do you know what to,
Yeah, I think like I sort of felt like the clown at the carnival who's spinning the plates, riding the small bicycle. It's just you're trying to keep everything in the air at the same time. And, you have to be really intentional about what your priorities are and where you spend your time. I remember on Mondays, I'd kick off fully automated email sequences outbound to drum up pipeline. And then
acting as a BDR.
Acting as a BDR. So basically being a BDR. And then you and I would, get on a couple deal calls. So now I'm an AE and I'm partnering with you who is operating as, solutions engineer. Then we'd close some deals. We'd transition to post-sale in the same week. I'd take feedback from the front lines and give it a product.
You're the CSM now.
The CSM, right? And then I was the product manager. And so you're wearing a lot of hats, but like if you want to go early and be early, like and learn all that stuff, then there's a fee to be paid, and that was it.
So when does hiring play a role in that then? Because everyone always talks about you got to hire the right people, but like how the fuck are you able to hire the right people when you have to do all this stuff that you just mentioned? Like,
yeah. I think it's an interesting point, and it brings up like a broader topic on leadership, which I think we should talk about. You get to a point where, and I specifically remember the point where I went to a board meeting and I was like, look, all these fucking deals are closing. Like, this is so exciting. and the board was like, yeah, we get the deals. Like, fuck the deals. Like, when are we building a team? Like, guys, we just started closing deals. Like, let's enjoy this. And like, no. Like, we get it. You guys can close deals. Like, let's build a team. And so I remember saying, okay, well, now I'm a recruiter, a sourcer and a recruiter, and I'm doing the other 5 jobs. Like, revenue's going to take a hit. And ultimately it did, because we started to build out a team. And, obviously you can't focus 100% of your time on deals anymore.
Can't have it all, yeah.
And so revenue took a hit. But now we definitely have a system. So we have great business partners that help source, recruit, manage the talent funnel based on capacity plans, which is who we need to hire by when to get to specific goals. But back then it was, we were working with an outsourced recruiting firm, but we were also, leaning in heavily to try and attract the right people. And at that time, what we were looking for was people that had been successful in adjacencies. So companies in our space that came before us and had done what we were trying to do, that knew the product market fit, knew the sale, had that domain expertise, but still matched the criteria of what we were looking for, as I mentioned before. And so those were really the people we were after.
But how do you know so it's kind of like what you alluded to before, if you try to hire someone that's in mid-market that's already been enterprise for 7 years, probably not a good fit. So like when you think about someone that's actually done it before, especially on the sales side, how do you know if they are a good fit? Like if they're willing to go through the shit again,
I think you test for that in the interview, right? You test for, like a big thing we test for right now is self-awareness. And
in what way? Like how do you test?
We're looking for humility. We're looking for people that are okay with saying, I learned from failures as much as I learned from successes. We think that's super important. Like we have a no ego environment. We don't do well with arrogance. We believe in strong opinions, lightly held, meaning you and I might come to the table with each having a strong opinion, and you have to have an opinion to sit at the table, but being able to negotiate those and walk away with a better opinion or better outcome than what you maybe came in with. And so we test for all those. So you figure out, again, what are the needs of the team and the company at that time, whether that's account mapping and, where you're trying to sell into. Could also be personality traits that thrive within your team based on what you're seeing, with the core team you have today. And then you structure interview questions to address those things.
See, now here's my question for you, like a genuine curiosity, because I've always found it very difficult. I've said yes to some really bad hires myself, and I like to think I have a good, judgment. But when it comes to like those kinds of questions of really figuring out, is this person a grinder? Do they have personal goals that actually align with like, hey, they don't have to love the product, but that the company could actually help them hit those goals. Like what are like the kind of questions you could even ask them? Because I've been struggling with that personally. I'm not even, really sure.
Again, if you're trying to test for a specific criteria, you can't ask somebody, are you a hard worker? Are you intelligent? So you've got to be thoughtful about the questions, right? So measuring intelligence, you might give them an assignment on a second interview and then ask them to come back with that on the third interview and see What was the thought process? How did they put it together? How would they approach it? Teach them something on a second interview about your company, and then quiz them on it. Could be subtly or not subtly in the third interview, and see, are they coachable? Did they actually take what you said and take it to heart? Did they retain it? Are they intelligent? Are they curious? Do they ask you questions? Are their questions thoughtful? So you start to figure out what are the things that matter for you, self-aware. So, can they talk about things that they learned from failures in their career and be very explicit and open about that? So you start to figure out like, what are the criteria that we need for our team at this stage? And then how do you structure the interview questions to get at that? And then the biggest thing that we've implemented, which is drastically increased our, conversion rate as far as being able to hire the right people, is role plays. And so everybody that we've hired in our sales org has done a role play.
And we're talking about Cortex right now, folks, by the way. So the current job, and by role play, is that the final interview? Is you're kind of?
It's usually, there's a role play, and then there's a meeting with the founders as a final culture screen.
Gotcha. So what question are you asking from the grinder perspective? How do you know someone's, dude, a startup? I'm sorry, but I'm very biased towards this. Like, it's easy to have a bad hire in a startup if someone's coming in from, I don't want to generalize too much, but I will, like a giant company. If you're coming from a giant company, go to a startup.
I start before that. So if we're a small company, I'm not hiring you out of a big company, because out of a big company, a startup's too dynamic. It moves too quickly. There's too many, you're gonna be comfortable in a big company having certain things that aren't gonna exist for many years in a startup. So I don't, from a sourcing perspective, you're out of my funnel before we even begin. I think you can make exceptions, and I don't want to make absolute blanket statements, but for the most part, we try and be really thoughtful about that. And then, again, so you asked about grinders. I like to ask multiple questions, and particularly if you ask them in fast, like rapid pace, you can really get to the truth of it. So, describe your work ethic. Oh, I work hard. Okay, well, talk to me about a normal week. Well, I have some sales meetings. Well, how many do you have? Well, I have 3. Okay, what do you do with the other 37 hours that week? And then you can kind of see, somebody who's actually doing the job the way you want it to be done just takes you a second to lie. But if you're telling the truth, you can be very quick with it and get to the truth of it very quickly.
That's the first time I've actually heard that way of interviewing style. You never told me that before either. Is that what you did with me?
Learning as we go.
It's the first time for me. And you think about the team that you've been building now, so FireHydrant. Long story short, to summarize that, that growth period that led you to VP of sales, it was playing a shit ton of hats, taking a step back a little bit to build a team. And then now that you finally had the team, you're able to, again, focus on the scalability. You're always 2 to 3 years ahead. So thinking about what you've done there, and I don't know if I could probably can't talk exact numbers here. And we obviously had a great product. So shout out to Robert there. But when you think about making the move to the next company, which would also mean making the move to going towards 100 mil, no small feat. How did that decision come about? What was happening over there?
If you go back to my 3 criteria, I was watching something happen in the market during my time at FireHydrant, and I got to a point where I couldn't look past it anymore. There was this internal developer portal movement happening, and it just had huge momentum. And so I started tracking Cortex, and I got introduced to the founders via recruiter, and I wasn't interviewing, and I simply responded to the email and said, I get a lot of these emails. I don't answer any of them, but if this company's Cortex, I know the space well, and I'm tracking them, we'll talk. And then from there, it was, okay, I understand the space and the timing of it and the size of it. Got on with the founders, and one of the founders said, look, this is developer system of record. And I remember thinking, that's fucking big. I don't know how big, but that's big. And big with a B in front of it for billions.
And can you put that in layman's terms for everyone else out there, what developer portal is and why it was so huge?
Yeah, so as an organization, an engineering organization scales, once you pass about 100 engineers, inherently complexities start to show up, right? So the way that you build and deploy applications changes. You move from building a single language code base into decoupling that into what's called microservices. Now, all of a sudden, you have small development teams, each essentially running their own team the way they want to do it, their own tooling, their own languages, programming languages. And so it becomes a mess. And you think about that problem at scale of hundreds or thousands of developers, it's just orders of magnitude more problematic. And so
who owns what? How does something work?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who's doing the job? What's productivity actually look like? And, if you look at the market a few years ago, the name of the game was developers, tides were really high. We were coming off a bull market. It was really, really difficult to hire developers. So they would just throw money at these people. And the name of the game was acquire as many developers as possible. And now things have changed, right? We care about profitability and efficiency. So now developer productivity is the number one thing that's front of mind for CTOs of Global 2000 accounts today. So what our product does is not only does it give efficiencies to the engineering org because it solves all those problems at scale I was mentioning, but it also gives the chief technology officer, who's our executive sponsor, visibility into productivity down at the team and the individual level. So you can think of it doing on the on the R&D side, what Salesforce did on the go-to-market side.
Which is crazy because I saw the same trend that you were seeing. We definitely talked about that numerous times, especially while it was happening in front of our eyes. And when you think about moving that transition from FireHydrant to Cortex, like at one point in FireHydrant, you had a team of what, like actual, not direct reports, but people under you basically like 25?
It's like 35.
35. Yeah. And then now you get to move, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, when I think about Cortex, you got to move to this other company. It's not pre-revenue, it wasn't like before, but you're moving to this other company where you got to basically create your own, assemble, your own crew. And what I was curious about is like, what learnings did you take from that rapid hire? Every tech company was doing rapid hire. I'm sure you don't have to say it here that the board had a play, as they did in many other companies, right? Not just FireHydrant, but what was the biggest thing that you took away there? And you're like, okay, I'm starting a brand new team,
Yeah,
because 35 is a lot, bro.
Yeah.
That's like a lot of people.
Yeah, in we've approached that level again at my new company, and I think that a big reason I got the job and just something I think for everybody to remember is I'm so early in my journey. I'm learning. You think about failures, like I fail multiple times a week, but I try and fail in a controlled environment. We learn from those failures and we iterate quickly and we course correct, but like we're failing everywhere. And so a big reason I got the job when I interviewed with our VC was I just said, look, I just did this for 3 years and here's my growth story. Here's how I kept my growth curve ahead of the company. But I learned more shit about what doesn't work than probably what does work. But if I could combine those learnings and come here, I could do it again, bigger, better, faster, and really make an impact. And so trying to bring those learnings into an org. And I think, the biggest thing that I would say I've tried to learn or maybe grow and do differently is we always start with the team, like always having a really great team. But I think one of the things we do really well is we have an exceptional go-to-market team, right? That includes marketing, it includes sales, it includes product marketing, which is part of marketing. You could count product and engineering as being part of that. And we work so well cross-functionally. It's like a beautiful symphony. And that to me is like, it starts and ends with the team. And this is a company that's really figured that out.
And are you heading customer success right now too?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So customer success is a different branch.
Yep.
There. Okay. Got you. So when you think about your team, damn, there's 35 people under you now at this stage, close to that?
There's 35 people probably in go-to-market in total. So marketing doesn't report to me at all. But
how many people of that were you in charge of like hiring? Were there people there already at go-to-market side?
There were a few. Yeah, I think like most of the growth has happened this year.
Gotcha. So if the company goes down under a go-to-market side, you're solely at this point, this is your team.
No comment.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. So what are some of those lessons then that you carried over? Like when you thought about explicitly the kind of team you want to hire? Because take the product aside, right? Like you mentioned, I think anyone can learn. You're assuming when someone's coming to that role that they're going to have those tangible stuff, but like what were some of the intangibles that you're looking for?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about like talent and how we evaluate for it and make sure we're hiring just the best people. So that's the hardest part, right? Is convincing really great people to come and join. But if you put that aside, I think there's 2 things that determine how fast you can go. Number 1 is pipeline. So how quickly can you grow the pipeline, which is the overall, take the number of sales opportunities, multiply it by the dollars against each of those opportunities. That number is the sales pipeline. And so you need pipeline to support the salespeople you're hiring, or you shouldn't be hiring those people. You're doing them and yourself a disservice because nothing will tank a growth business faster than not having enough pipeline for the sales team you have.
So if I'm hearing that right, you'd rather everyone hit like 110% than have like a bunch of them, hope that they could hit that without having the actual.
The average
metrics.
AE attainment for last quarter within our company was 168%.
168, holy shit.
Yeah. So, and that's, I'd rather have a leaner team that's firing on all cylinders. And it helps with buy-in. It helps with attracting more people when you can point and say, look what these people are doing, look what we're building. It helps with retention because, people aren't going to walk away from that situation. It keeps your bottom line down, so it keeps your burn down, meaning you can live the company longer because you're hiring less people, which means less people are your biggest expense. So it's how quickly can you grow the pipeline? And then the second part is how quickly can you then and only then add new people to the mix and enable them and get them to a point of productivity.
So how do you figure then to mix in? How do you mix in like internal hires? You did a lot of that FireHydrant too, but how do you mix in internal hires when you think about that?
What do you mean by internal hires?
Or internal promotions to those roles that you would have hired for? Like,
it's a growth business. I mean, that was the thing when I look back on FireHydrant, I think was the thing that I'm most proud of was, hiring company builders and promoting from within. I think probably 40% of the org got promoted while I worked there. And, when I look back, that's the thing I'm most proud about is seeing people take that step in their career and then go find big success, either staying there or going elsewhere. So here it's, again, it's, you learn a lot. And here I'm trying to balance internal promotions with external expertise because promoting somebody from within means they know your culture, they know the DNA of the company, they know how things should be done, they've proven they can do it. So it's de-risked in that sense. But you can overextend people, so if you're going to promote somebody into a sales leadership role, well, they've never done that before. And, maybe they're going to manage 5 people and maybe the sales team's only 15 people next year. So now all of a sudden 1/3 of your revenue is associated to somebody that's doing it for the first time. And you've got to be able to calculate, can that person's growth curve stay ahead of the company's? Can they learn that role and get successful quickly? Because otherwise it's, now you're looking at potentially moving somebody out of the business who is a great enough person to promote in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I was lucky enough to be one of those promotions. I remember when you called me up randomly, like, "Hey, we're giving you a raise and promotion, by the way." I'm like, "For what?" Like, I didn't even ask for it, which was great.
No brainer.
Which was awesome. And when you think about, so a lot of things that you mentioned too, I find really fascinating. It's like the shift of mindset from an IC to actually leadership position. And I've been able to like learn what that actually looks like in the past year. It's easy to always try to tell someone like, "Oh, think about the business," right? Instead of thinking about yourself. Like, it's not as easy as that. Like, there's certain things that start clicking in your head that you think about in a different way. So can you get us like in the mindset of like how you approach problems and the kind of problems you have today as a VP of sales so people could understand, why those problems are actually vastly different than the problems that
I think so. There's something I would decouple there. So I think the hardest job in business, well, I would say is being a BDR, but I think the second hardest job is the first line sales manager because you get squeezed from every angle, right? Like you're getting your managers, your boss is breathing down your neck. You're trying to corral multiple pipelines of reps and figure out what's going on. So I think being a first line leader is extremely difficult to learn, and the biggest thing you have to learn is that it's no longer about you. There's that old adage where it's like, "Well, do you have kids?" It's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Well, if you're going to be a manager, you're going to add 5 or 6 more depending on how many reports you have," because all of a sudden it's about them, not you. It's what time do they want to get up? When do they need your help? What coaching do they need from you? So that's the biggest mindset shift you have to have is moving from a place of it's all about me and it's my world and my accounts and my deals to caring about your people. Now, when you get up to head of sales, VP of sales, reporting to the CEO, there's like chicken shit problems you have to deal with, which is who has, did everybody get a laptop? And, some of the more frivolous things, it's like in a small company, somebody's got to do it. So who's going to own it? Well, at the end of the day, like if it needs to get done, it gets done one way or another. So there's sort of those problems you don't think about. And I don't think most people that are in the team or in the org see those, they just assume they happen. Mm-hmm. But then there's much more strategic problems, right? Where it's like reporting to the board, making big hiring decisions, making decisions like when do we go into Europe? Like, are we going to stay in the US? Do we enter Europe this year or next year? How do we think about channel and partners? Do we work with the global systems integrators? Like, what's our strategy there? And those are decisions that made wrong can tank the company, right? Like Europe could be a multi-million-dollar P&L in itself. And if you have raised, 20 million might sound like a lot of money when you raise it, but if you're going to spend 5 of it on Europe and it flops, well, you may have just tanked the company, right? You may have just tanked your startup. And so, I think that's part of it. And I think the other thing that I think a lot about, and I don't know that everybody else thinks about that's not at that level, is how many people are depending on you, right? Like I had a mentor once say to me, in sales, there's two types of people. There's people that sales chose them, and there's people that chose sales. And the way I think about it for any Game of Thrones fans out there is, in sales, you're a lot like the Night Watch. And for me, I love that. Like, I'm Jon Snow, put me on the wall. I want all the smoke, right? And I know that we've got the village behind us, and I'm going to protect them, or I'm going to die trying, as cheesy as that sounds.
Yeah.
My village is right now 100 people. I've got 100 people in my company that depend on us as a sales org to deliver the revenue, to fuel the growth of the company so they get their paycheck. So, if you think about their extended families, that might be 5, 6, 7 people. Okay, well, now we're talking 500 people depending on our execution. Talk about investors and shareholders. Like, probably 1,000 people are looking at us as the sales org and ultimately the leader and saying, do we have the right person to execute against a plan that we believe in to get us to that next phase? And so I don't take that lightly. That's some mornings you wake up, I just want to sleep in, and then you see like 1,000 faces. And for me, I thrive in that. Like, I love that pressure, but I don't think everybody thinks like that.
Well, what is that like mentally? Do you think is that something you think about all the time, or is it one of those, it's just every now and then?
I think I'm intrinsically motivated. I get up with this, like, I wake up with a ball of energy, and then I burn it down as I go throughout the day. And then, I start off with the gym in the morning. Like, that's a non-negotiable every morning. And that helps me be able to control the exertion of that energy in a more, otherwise I'm just a crazy person. I'm just like yelling at people all day on Slack, and that's not good for anybody. So I try and get some clarity from the gym, but then I'm intrinsically motivated. So I think about that at night. Like, that's when I'm laying in bed, that's what I'm thinking about. Or
is it every night that you actually think about that?
I don't know that I think about that specifically every night, but I certainly think about the responsibility of what it means to be a VP of sales, driving the growth of a company with high expectations. Like I definitely think about that every night. A lot of those people are 1 degree removed, so I definitely think about it, but I think about probably more the people in our org that have bet their careers on us. You talk about people coming from the peak of their career and betting to come work with us. And so again, it goes back to some points made earlier. I think about, are we doing enough to set them up for success? Like as a VP of sales, one of the shittiest parts of the job is there's so much context switching, where I might start my day in a dashboard, go into a deal review, do a one-on-one with a direct report, do a one-on-one with a skip level, get pulled into a meeting on renewals, talk about a board deck, meet with marketing. So in a lot of ways, you're a specialist, but you're a generalist. And I feel like I do a lot of things maybe good, and I could do them great if I had more focus and more time. And so one of the things I think a lot about is, okay, when I close my laptop for the day, like, well, shit, did I spend enough time talking to our people? Did I spend enough time, with that person that asked me for a one-on-one or a skip level, or said, hey, I want to bounce some ideas off you, or hey, I wish we caught up more. Like, that's really where I lose sleep, but all the other shit definitely weighs heavy.
Do you think that's a common problem of what you laid out for other VPs? Do you think it's just the nature of your company? Like,
I don't want to give myself too much credit. I think it's something unique about me and the people that I like to work with. Like, our team really cares, right? And all of our relationships are built on trust. And like, you can trust me, you can trust knowing that I care a lot about you, and the feedback I give you might be tough, but I'm not giving it to you to knock you down. I'm giving it to you because I care, right? I'm always going to tell you how I feel. And I don't think all leaders think like that. And I think that's a problem for them. And I think it's a superpower for us, because it's 2023. People are done getting yelled at, right? Like, I went to work for CROs who were Bill Parcells. People don't want to work for Bill Parcells anymore, or Belichick. They want to work for Sean McVay, or that guy down in Miami that people love, that young coach. Like, people want to work for...
Or Mike McDaniel. You do kind of look like Sean McVay, too.
I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult.
Yeah, I love Sean McVay, bro.
But like, people want to work for people that care about them, and they feel like I have a vested interest in their success. And I do. And maybe I should communicate that more, but I really do. And, I think a lot of my time is spent as a coach. A lot of my time is also spent as a team captain. where I'm on the field doing the things that I'm asking other people to do themselves. So
it's funny hearing you say this, because something that I took from you that I don't even know if you meant to do this on purpose, but something that I took from you was it always seemed like I knew how you felt about me, as in like I knew you cared. So anything that you said to me, it was never like, oh, feedback or criticism. No, it was never criticism. It was always like, yo, you could be better. Like, here's why. Like, here's things you could do. And I always took that as like, this person's telling me it because they care about me. So I've always made an effort. And that was even when I was like the interim director of customer engineering. Like, I've always made an effort to first establish to the person, like, I care about you as a person. And that's through numerous ways, right? But I always try to establish that first, because everything coming afterwards, like whenever I would give feedback, I didn't have to put as much of a filter, because I could just be like, because sometimes the filter is BS too. I'm sure if you deal with it to this day, but for me, the filter is always BS. It's like, listen, I care about you. This is why I'm just gonna say this. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, we needed to just get better X, Y, Z.
Yeah, and I think like you establish that trust, and then you don't have to provide the filter, and that's how I operate. And we're really intentional about spending time in one-on-ones or offsites and breaking bread and being a human, and that way it's like, you know, the example I always use is, you know, like if we're on the soccer field and you're breaking open down the, you know, streaking down the left side, and I miss you on a wide open pass, you shouldn't come over and be like, hey, I'm going to tell you something mean here, but like hit me on the fucking pass next time. Like, come over and be like, what the fuck, you missed the pass. And that's sort of how we operate. It's like, you know, we're moving too quickly, like, know that I care about you. And I think, you know, like Howard Schultz talks about it, you have to build, like, trust is like a lake, right? And you build it over time with your people, and then you draw down on it in moments of stress or when you need something. And you might have to burn a little trust when you give hard feedback or you raise the bar on expectations, but then you build that back up over time, and they know you care about them. And you can't be drawn down on it all the time, but there is times where you have to, you know, give tough love, and has to be received.
CEO of Starbucks, by the way. So when we think about like who's the one giving you feedback? Like, how do you know what decisions you're making are not right, and how to course correct? You know, especially as a VP of sales. Yeah,
no, it's a great question. I think, you know, like working for first-time technical founders, my current founders are incredible. Like and I'm not pandering to the audience, not that I think they're listening to this, but I love working with them every day. They are geniuses in running business as well as developing product, and that's rare to have somebody that does both. But the unspoken contract that you sign and what you agree to do as a, you know, first in VP of sales reporting to the CEO is, I'm not looking or expecting feedback on how to run a sales team from my boss. I'm looking for his feedback on, does he think I'm spending my time in the right areas? Is he satisfied with my performance? Those types of things.
You've come to this place now, and obviously you're still learning at this point in time, but for someone else that's watching, think entry level too. You're just getting to the space in general. Maybe you're not even sure what the fuck SaaS is, right? What company to pick, how to network. Like, how does someone come in bare bones, like entry level? What do you think in your expertise and experience is the best way you would start at this point in time if that was you?
The most important thing is to get started at a company that's going to grow and do well. And there's that old adage of just get on a rocket ship and ask later about what seat you're in, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think there's some truth to that. It's finding great companies. If you join the right companies, in their growth companies, opportunities will present themselves. The company will grow. Your boss will likely get promoted. Somebody will need to take on that role. So it creates this like vortex where you can start to move up on your own. And
how do you know though? Like, how do you know it's that kind of company?
You know, there's a lot of, first of all, you can talk to people in your network. There's also a lot of like public materials out there that rank companies. So Forbes Cloud 100 is a great one. So you can Google, you know, best, you know, pick a space you're excited about, you know, best companies in AI software for 2024 as an example, and figure out, you know, what's the short list of companies you're excited about. Ground that, sense check that with some people that might know the space, and then just get out there. And I think reach out, try and establish connections. I think early on, there's no such thing as a bad conversation. So, you know, you can reach out to people from that company, you can reach out to people in that industry, and just start being explicit about what your intentions are. Like, I am a young person, I'm trying to get into this role or break into this industry. Can I get 15 minutes of your time to get your perspective on how I might go about that thoughtfully. And you'd be surprised how many people actually want to help you, especially if you're not trying to sell them something. I think, if somebody was to reach out to me and say, hey, 15 minutes, I would just want to understand how to land a BDR job at a company like yours, an AE job. Like, I take that call same day, And so putting yourself out there and establishing those connections, I think is really huge.
And let me put the realistic side to this. So how do you know you're swinging to, you're biting off more than you could chew? Like, if it's a big company, we'll start generalizing. Small company, you could probably reach out to someone like you. Big company, like who would you reach out to if you're looking at like a bigger company?
Yeah, I think, reaching out to like manager level people is a great entry point. People that are approachable, people that are maybe 3 to 5 years ahead of you. So reach out to somebody. If you're 22, reach out to somebody who's 27 and did the job that you want to go do. Say, hey, you've had a great few years. I'd love to learn from you, right? They would be thrilled with the opportunity to speak to you, right? Because a CEO of a publicly traded company gets hit up like this every single day. Somebody who's 27 is going to go, you want to talk to me? You want to learn from me? Like, absolutely. And then you start there and you take that knowledge and parlay that into another conversation if you can't break through there. And you just start sort of having those conversations and working your way up and around.
Yeah. And you mentioned it earlier, like SDR, entry level. Pretty much if you're in sales, like everyone knows SDR, entry level, tough fucking job.
Really tough. The hardest.
But if you get past that and you find success in that, the world's kind of your oyster. What would you... How do you get past that? What are the mental things that you got to be prepared for? And then what do you actually have to do?
You have to know going in that it's going to be 9 to 12 months of really hard work. And in a lot of ways, it's a thankless job. So BDR, SDR, you're qualifying interest that comes inbound. You're generating outbound demand. You're doing this through cold calls, cold emails. You're getting hung up on, and then you've got to do that all day and then wake up the next day and do it again and do that for 9 months. But you've got to be explicit with where you want to get to, right? Like nobody should be a BDR to be a BDR. It's the last stop. You're a BDR because you want to be an AE or you want to be a CSM or you want to get into tech. So establishing good, what I would call champions internally who can support you in that journey. Be explicit and say, look, I'm joining, but in 9 months I want this role. So let's establish a work back career development plan for how I get there.
I was literally just about to ask you that. So how does a BDR and SDR not fall in a trap? I've seen some fall in a trap where they're just going company to company. They're as like a senior now. And, how do you make sure you don't fall into that trap? Like you get that entry level job, knowing a clear path that you want to get to that golden AE position.
I think it's about joining the right company with a manager you trust. Look, things can always change. People might hire you with the intention of promoting you in a year, and there could be some kind of macro event that changes the circumstance. Like it's always dynamic and can change. But I think joining the right company that you know is going to grow means there's got to be future roles opening up as things expand. So if you can join a company that's growing and is healthy and doing well, then that will create the opportunities for you. And then you've got to commit, right? I see a lot of people, maybe they're 10 months in, they didn't get the promotion right away, and then they want to jump ship. And maybe they were going to get promoted in 14 months. Okay, well, you were 6 months from a promotion and now you went somewhere else and reset your clock and now you're looking at a year again. So at some point you've got to pick your spot and lean into it and roll with it.
Yeah. And that brings up a good point just from a high level perspective, like moving no BS way. How do you think looking back, not even looking back, if you're in a position now, you're coming into the workforce, just graduated college, how does someone get to VP of sales? Like what's the quickest way you think someone could take to get to VP of sales today? You can be very biased about this. What do you think would be the quickest way to go from like entry level to VP of sales?
I was not thinking when I got my first job about being a VP of sales. You have to go through so much. Maybe people have that conviction and hats off to them. I didn't. I had to go through so much growth and internal discovery and learning to realize that this was something that excited me. Because if you're a BDR, you have at least 5 different jobs you need to go do and do at an extremely high level before you're a VP. It's probably more than that. And you've got a major jump in between where you jump from caring only about yourself as an individual contributor to now caring about your team more than yourself. And I think my advice would be, it's okay to look one hop ahead. So go be the best fucking BDR in your company and be intentional about how you get to be an AE. And then once you're an AE, you're probably going to start in the mid-market or the SMB Might have to do a year or two of high performance there, probably closer to 2 or 3 years. Set that intention. Day one, say, hey, I'm here to enjoy this, but I want to get to enterprise. And I'm going to be so damn good at this job that the enterprise team is going to pull me up and then crush that job. And then you move up and you start to move up in the org. And sometimes you have to, you'll get a call and you'll move a company like I did to take a jump up externally that might move you faster than riding internally. And you've got to use your judgment and talk to your network and advisors, mentors to figure out if that's the right move to make. But you got to put the time in and really obsess about being great at your craft and be passionate about it, and then fall in love with managing people along the way. And ideally you can get up to being a VP.
So what's motivating you now then? You're at the VP. There's not many positions higher left when it gets to this point. But like, yeah, what's motivating you at this point?
I'm so early in my career. I have so much to learn. And the faster that I can help my current company grow, the more exposed I'll get in a good way to new things, So if we can really blow it out next year, then we can start a team in Europe, right? If we have an okay year, we probably don't start a team in Europe. I've never founded a team in Europe before. That sounds amazing. I'd love to go to Europe for a year. But that's just one example, right? Like, I'm after growth. And I know that, again, as faster we grow, the more of it I'll get. And I do have milestones in my head. Like, I want to take a company to 100 million in ARR. But you can bet your ass that as that's approaching, I'm going to be, oh, that was cool. Like, let's go to 250, right? So I find new ways to stay motivated. For me, those are some of my goals. I do want to found my own company. I don't know if this is my last go-to-market leadership role, or if I do this again or do it again multiple times, but there is a future in which I'm a founder. I know that for sure. And then obviously outside of work, I've got to balance that with all the other things I want in my life and within my personal life and, family and all that kind of stuff, because you get to a point where other opinions come into the picture, and it's not just, what does Scott Mullin want to do at all times? So
how do you balance that today? Because I kind of related to my cousin. He worked at banking, 18-hour days, 16-hour days, 6 days a week, maybe 7. Fucking miserable, right?
Yeah.
That's different because it wasn't as much of an enjoyment as more of like a paycheck, a nice one at that. But in your perspective, like how are you trying to like balance all of that? You clearly have like well-defined goals of where you want to get to, and they're lofty goals, but
sometimes you can balance it and sometimes you can't. And I think about it a lot like, I played sports growing up, and I played running back in high school. And I think about it like a running back running into a hole. They don't just run full speed the whole time. Sometimes you got to stutter step or jog or find out your next move and cut. That's sort of how I think about it. And so like right now we're in the thick of Q4. We're doing FY24 planning. Like, I know that work-life balance is not a thing for me between 2 Mondays ago and Christmas, or, December holidays.
Yeah.
I know it's not a thing, but I find time in the lulls. August is a slow month. So that's a time where I take some time away. But I think you make sacrifices, but I do think you also need to accept that it's an endless game. Like if there's 8 high priority things on my to-do list tonight, if I wake up tomorrow and knock them all out, by the end of the day tomorrow, there's going to be 8 more on there. So you have to be really intentional about what's immediate, like what's actually needs to get solved now, spending your time on that. And then you learn to be okay with going to bed at night knowing, there's a couple fires that are maybe still burning, but, I'm a forest ranger and I can only prioritize putting out the biggest fires at the moment. There's always going to be fires burning somewhere.
Looking forward to today, what are you most excited about coming up in these next couple of months? And what are you hyper-focused on?
I think, first of all, this is the best time of year in New York. So these next 2 months are amazing. Everybody's back in the city now. And so there's just this crazy energy here that I love, and, but I think professionally, it's finishing this year strong. We've got a bunch of travel. We've got a huge pipeline for Q4. So ending this year with a bang, getting a plan in place for next year, we're really excited about growing the team, seeing people beat their quotas this year and really step into it next year. So yeah, it's just, everything at the moment is turning up Cortex, and it's a lot of hard work, but we're executing, we're growing, we're beating. It's really enjoyable right now.
For sure. And Scott, appreciate you hopping on the show. This is episode number 2 of our new show, Reinvented. Learned a lot today. It was great to converse, and told you earlier we'll summarize like what we talked about in this episode in the beginning, so people will know coming in exactly what to expect. But outside of that, bro, you killed it. Again, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
And maybe after you're done being a VP, after 250 mil, once you have your own company, come back right here, talk about the new company you're building, promote that right here at Eat My Assets.
I love it. Yeah, thanks for having me on. This has been awesome, and huge fan of what you guys are doing. Looking forward to continuing to follow with success.
I appreciate you, brother. Let's get it.